How's it going, everybody? Just got live on the Facebook. If these shows resonate with you, please share. We're getting suppressed on YouTube and Facebook, but that's okay. We're going to get past it. We got Matt Belair. Matt Belair, really cool dude coming on just a second. I'm going to put a little intro on and allow people to come in and let me share it through the network. That gives me a chance to do that. If you would share to your page or to one group, that'd be great. We'd appreciate it. Be right back. Todd Medina, SoulogyOneStudios, coming at you with a little soul speak, instrumental to Pete Rock, great DJ from way back. Got a little soul speak about this life never ending, blending, bending, grounding, founding new frequencies, rainbow dreams, red, black, yellow, white, and brown. Seas being parted right back where we started, dearly departed. They're living, giving, ain't no forgiving. We're standing the higher ground, hear the sound following us around, grind it down. Reap and sow. World knows nothing who you are, what you know, Ascension takes every false heart. What we gonna do? Casting shadow pieces till the pain ceases every day. But hey, nothing better to do. Let's find out what we're made of, what we gotta lose. It's what you know. It's what we all know. You see, we're ripping spirit, flesh, soul, scientific, sacred, solitary, to the bone, to the bone, to the bone. I'm a fucking soul. Really ain't nothing to it. Just gotta find it in you. Truth be known, we've been shown all we need to know. Gotta own it. Can't forget, time to flow. It's not what you think, it's what you know. It's time to do some healing, revealing, sealing, dealing, trio colors, dripping, dropping, devil's lies can't resist, shedding, ego unpeeling. Another self dies to the soul, free and seeing, feeling, willing, ego crying, wolf trying to hang on to the last shadow piece. Make-believe world, political pimps, looking glass tricks. Let the light they sold, the history molded, undisclosed, sacred chakra unfolding, sovereignty is ours to have and hold. I will not bow to their needs as they border our dreams with the cries and screams, false fear in one another. I love my Sufi sisters and atheist brothers, Black Earth Mother, riding behind true, tried prophets. They try to reach us and teach us. It's all the same thing. I am soul. So are you. And don't forget that, no matter what happens. All right, let's bring up Matt Belair, man. I've been looking forward to this. I really dig what he does. I dig him. He's cool, super cool dude. And he's got a great podcast that I have a lot of respect for, as well as the man. Let me get him up here. We're getting suppressed. Please share this out if you don't mind. We're really getting pushed back at this moment. So we would appreciate it if you'd share it out. Can you hear me, Matt?
I can hear you. You got me?
Yeah, let me see. Hang on. Video. I'm sending you. I can hear you. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, man.
What's up, brother?
What's up, Todd? How are you, dude?
Man, mastermind, body, and spirit, right? Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, dude. Well, thanks so much for having me on the show. I was saying in the comments and in the messages, I think you're the only guy who puts out more content than I do. I put out a lot of content, man, but I think that you got me. It's really impressive.
I know you do, man. No, man, we're all just doing the same thing. No, I really dig what you do. For those of you who don't know, and I am going to ask you one more time if you would share. We don't usually press that hard on it, but we're really getting pushed back right now, and we're still working on an alternative to this matrix-based venues that we have. But we'll get there. But if not, you can watch it on the replay. But if you would share it to your friends, we would appreciate it. Matt Belair has a great podcast. It's called Mastermind, Body, and Spirit. He also has a book, an excellent book I turned my sons on to. I think it's called Zen Athlete. He's just out there doing it, and this is the I Am Soul in action. That's what Matt is, and I have all the respect for him in the world. I don't watch a lot of people and I can be a little bit, I think I came into this world to try to get rid of some arrogance. So I don't really look at people. I think I got rid of that alpha male thing. So I'm not trying to compete with everybody, just compete with myself. But I really have a tremendous amount of respect for you because I know how much work it takes, to find people, to do the shows, to hold space. And you have such a diverse subject matter and peoples that come on the show. It's quite incredible. So I just want to say big props to you, and thanks for having you. Thanks for coming back on, and congratulations on the new addition to your family, a beautiful baby I saw about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for all that. I really do appreciate that, man. And all the respect right back. It is a ton of work. And I'm glad you're listening, dude. It's hard when you create so much content to receive, you know what I mean? To like put out so much content, but also there's so much out there, right? So man, yeah, I appreciate you listening, the kind words. And yeah, I had a daughter about 2 months ago, so that's changed the entire game for me, shifted priorities, what I'm focused on, and what I want to do. Like the core of me is obviously the same, and how I want to impact the world, and what I'm doing. But just having a daughter, they say it changes you, and I'm starting to see that more and more. You can hear it, but you got to be in it, and then you're kind of like, oh, okay, I see what everyone's talking about now.
You have no idea, bro.
No, yeah,
I raised
no.
I raised four of them, and I raised four of them. No. Daughters are beautiful, man. I mean, a lot of people talk about daughters are more work, and they are, But I'll tell you what, my two youngest daughters taught me a lot going through a lot of this stuff a few years back. In the early teens, they all change, by the way, by the time they get to like 9, 10, or 11. They become a different person altogether, so get ready for that. You're going to need all that Zen athlete training to come in handy, that mind over body stuff, and pushing beyond limits. I'm just kidding with you.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I'm going to be
Man, your
relying a
work is
lot on
going
the
through the
partner.
roof. I saw a, yeah, I was going to say it'd be good to have her around. We have a little bit of a lag, so I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're putting out just all kinds of stuff, and if you guys haven't seen, I know you're on iTunes, you're on YouTube, I know you're on Facebook. You put a post out a couple of days ago where you hit like what, 1 million, 2 million downloads on iTunes,
Yeah, I hit
and
I hit
other
2 million.
metrics.
And for me,
Yeah.
the interesting statistic for my show is because they're longer, they're like yours, are 60 to 90 minutes. So the listen time is really where it gets interesting. So I was at like about 50 million minutes. But just like you, it's kind of a bummer that I've had to do a little bit of an uphill battle, because last year at this time, 2 months ago, I was hitting 100,000 downloads a month, 150,000 downloads a month. Something's been going on since, I got booted out of iTunes, all this kind of trouble. Now I was down to 50,000 bucks or 50,000 views a month, a third of what I had, and producing even more content with bigger
Wow.
shows, limited on Facebook, limited on YouTube. People can't find my shows. So, I don't know what's going on out
Yeah.
there, man, but it's been frustrating, and the statistics took a huge hit. And I was actually at, Collective Evolution with Joe Martino, and he was talking about it as well. And when they hit him, he went from, he shared this publicly, but with the amount of traffic and everything he got with ads, he was at like 1.8 million, and they brought him down all the way to 300,000, and his operating costs were $500,000 with everything he paid out. So he had to lose money for about a year to kind of build it all back up. So shout out to Joe Martino for the integrity and the future planning. But a lot of people got hit with that, and that's where it's really challenging. You know what I mean? I was like, yes, I finally made it. It's like 150,000 downloads. I'm going to be able to make income from this, and I'm going to be able to do what I need to do. It's going to be easier. And then it's like, nope, like you gotta overcome this one now. I was like, oh my goodness.
No.
Like, all right, here we go. Too stubborn to quit.
Yeah, it's an interesting proposition because for some people, I think for some people that are a little bit, I don't want to say more radical, because I consider you radical energetically, myself radical energetically, but I mean people who might be I don't want to say beating a dead horse, but really banging the drum loudly in regard to conspiracy and stuff that might not sit too well with the powerless powers that be. But it is kind of under the radar. And I noticed this about 2.5 years ago, because we used to broadcast out of the SoulogyOneStudios Facebook page, and they had metrics at the time. You could get metrics for the business pages, and we were pulling in 500,000 people a week reach with about 23% engagement. And so you can't. No, I shifted from there to the group where they really suppress you, and then to my personal page where I did pretty good up until about 6 or 8 months ago. I was under the radar. We were getting, everyone was getting notifications. We were pulling in a lot of people, triple figures most of the time, live. But then we started getting hit, and I just know to keep on going, because I know there's something outside of the physical that's working with us and supporting us, and it's still getting out there. And one of the other things that I'd point out too, and you might have run into this, we've done some traveling, and we're running into people who are saying, we watch you all the time, and I've never seen the name, I've never seen the face, so I have a feeling that for both capitalistic reasons and otherwise, possibly, not that I'm into any conspiracy stuff, but that this information's being withheld. The level of awareness that's actually occurring is probably being peeled back so that it will encourage people to buy advertising and stuff like that. But I think we can work out. I've been working on this since I met you. This independent stream with multiple channels and the app base. We're going to get there. There's a lot of stuff coming together for a lot of people, and I see that happening with you. I see your energy. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, of the many things, is your relationship. And I'm 57 years old on the linear scale, and I can't remember his name, but you've done a lot of work with this native elder. I tuned into one of the episodes the other day where he was talking about at length about these weather balloons, or I'm sorry, these I don't know what you would call them, but these balloons that he sends up into space. And this guy's an engineer and a scientist and such. Really, really interesting stuff that's tied into sacred wisdom that's been passed down through oral histories and that. Can you tell us who this gentleman is and tell us a little bit about your experience? Because I know you sat with him and I guess trained with him for quite a period of time. You'd mentioned in one of your other videos.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, his name is David Lombert Senepas, and I invite people to check out episode 53 of the podcast, because that was the first time he had ever done a podcast. He is a Mi'kmaq, and I saw him speak. The first time I met him, I saw him speak at the Gem and Jam Festival in Arizona. I was visiting friends, and I was in Arizona, and they said, "Oh, there's a festival this weekend. Do you want to go?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I went, and on Sunday, I watched him speak, and he said the craziest, most out there story about, being trained by 600 elders for the first 26 years of his life on the side of a mountain, telling stories about orbs coming out of the ground, and basically saying that his elders had asked him to share the star teachings and some of the Mi'kmaq history with the non-natives for the first time ever. I didn't know any Native Americans. I don't know that much about them other than what you kind of get in, Western history in schools and your basic general knowledge. So I was super curious about what he was saying. And I've been really curious about, indigenous wisdom, indigenous cultures for a long time. So he's like, well, come and see me speak again. So saw him speak again, and again, more really just unbelievably fascinating stories and really out there stories, And so I wanted to see if what he was saying is true. And so I was like, hey, well, first thing, come on my podcast. And so he came on my podcast. He had never done a podcast before. He goes on for 3.5 hours. Okay. And he's going on about Atlantis being a spaceship. It wasn't a continent. It was a spaceship. And so you got to understand too, we're going to get into it. He has a 20,000 year oral history. I know 2 other indigenous elders, Clifford Mahudi, who's a Zuni, who I think you know, and Carlos Barrios, who's a Mayan elder. I've met both of them in person. I've talked to both of them in person about what David said, what each other said, and I kind of ding it off one another to see if they're saying the truth. They all generally are saying the exact same thing, but they come from a different lineage. And they pretty much agree on some of those base concepts or ideas, although they might have a varying degree of history or an insight on a particular topic, but they're generally around the same thing. So he's on the podcast 3.5 hours talking about being taught by these 600 elders from around the world, math, engineering, physics, biology, chemistry, history, you name it. And when you're talking about the balloons, they're high altitude balloons that he sent up into space. I think it's a world record for an individual to do on its own. He talks about how they work in a very interesting way, but he has to use Mylar because weather balloons crap out at a certain altitude, and there's this little motor. Some of it, I'm pretty sure I can share most, but some of it I'm not supposed to. But it's this little like motor that allows it to go higher, and it creates like this little electromagnetic field. What he's measuring with that is the magnetic field of the Earth, but he's also has cameras on them to research UFOs and things like that. And in the Mi'kmaq culture, in the Zuni culture, and many of the indigenous cultures, star travelers or star people or star civilizations are normal. It's like, cats exist, dogs exist. It's not this fantastic thing. And I've accompanied him to the Washington Capitol, and he spoke with Clifford Mahooty, and you hear all the other speakers, and they're really great. And the indigenous view on it is so different, and it's so much more grounded, and it seems like they have this information that is not generally known. That what have we done as a Western culture to ask the indigenous cultures to share their history? We really don't know that much. What we do know is that there was a cultural genocide of Native Americans in Canada and North America and around the world. We haven't been trying to figure out what their information is. And if it goes past 20,000 years, that easily includes Jesus. It includes the pyramids. It includes a bunch of other stuff. It includes the Mayan civilization. And so I'm really curious. I've been to over 30 countries. I went to Egypt with the Resident Science Foundation, exploring it with engineers, mathematicians, all these different people. And I had an opportunity. So I may as well just tell the whole story because it's just what kind of got me into it. But after David did the first podcast, and listen to episode 53, you'll see how young I am at podcasting at the time. My enthusiasm, I don't know, I was just doing my best. But, it's such a mind-blowing show, and I didn't really know him. So after that episode, I called him and I said, is what you're telling me true? Or you're a Native American storyteller, so you're sharing stories so that we're more kind and we're more compassionate, because he's drawing those points home in his stories. And he said, yes, I am a storyteller, but the stories that I told you were true. And I was like, okay, holy smokes. And he goes, in some of these, he's talking about technologies, and he goes, I could put you in a tunnel and bring you to where I am right now. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. He's like, do you need me to? And I didn't know if it was like spiritual faith or something like, if I didn't have faith, I couldn't go, thinking about all the yogis and ascended masters and all that kind of, my mind's all in the clouds, because he definitely had me all rattled. And I go, well, you don't have to, but it'd be really cool if you did. And so he goes, okay, look at the sky tonight. You may or may not see something. I was at Arco Santi, which is between Phoenix and Sedona. And I was at the lower level where some of the people live at the lower level, and Arco Santi is the building up, and you could look up Arco Santi. It's just a really cool place. And so my friend Rob lives there. Shout out Rob Jameson, awesome guy. And I was at the lower level, and I started walking up. I had forgotten what he had said. And I look above the building as I'm walking up, and there's a star brighter than the North Star above the building. It's like 50 feet, 100 feet above the building. I was like, holy crap. And so I run up the hill. I keep my eyes on the star the whole time. It goes across the road, which is probably half of a mile. I'm looking at this thing, and it looks like the North Star. And I'm like, well, how do I communicate with something I don't understand? Let's try some ohms. So I try some ohms. This thing comes closer and closer and closer, keeps getting closer. It gets to probably 50 or 100 feet away, probably 50. It was pretty close, 50 or 100 feet up. And I'm looking at this thing, and it is a star. It is not an object. It's not physical. It is making no sound. And I'm staring right at it, and it's super close. Go back 4 hours. He's talking about ancient technologies, star people, star travelers, teleportation. Now I get afraid, and I think I'm going to get zapped in some sort of interdimensional bubble. And I'm like, oh, shoot. So then this star backs up. It starts to back up. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. I calm down, and it stops. It just stays there and it hovers around. I watched this thing for about 40 minutes before I just got bored. I was in this open space, and I just kept my eyes on it the whole time. And what it was doing, it was morphing like a star, but then it would kind of go into a triangle, and it had really thin rays of light coming out of it, really thin. It looked exactly like the Freemason triangle with those thin lines coming out, but it was making no sound, and it wasn't physical. It's kind of morphing. And so I have it on video. You can look up UFO orb Arco Santi. It is on my YouTube channel. The video sucks because it was at night and I was using my phone, but it's there. That's what I was seeing. And you can analyze the video. Let me know what you think. And so Yeah, so that had happened, and the next day, well, actually, let me just hold on. I can show you, which is interesting. So over
Go
piecing
ahead.
it together, can you see? Check out this background. This is his art.
This is David's art.
That's David Lombaire's
Wow.
art, and that's without like the triangle is more pronounced in this piece, but see those lines? They were straight,
Yeah.
but it was a triangle kind of like that. And
Uh,
this is a piece of his art called Strands of Light. And so,
so
uh,
you,
go ahead.
you're having you're having a conversation with him, and he tells you, go watch the sky tonight. You might see something, and that's when this happened. Is that how that went down?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so you know, I mean, this is a great. I had no idea that it was going to go this direction, but I'm totally into this. I did meet Clifford. I did meet Clifford last year up in Sedona at a couple of conferences. I do get what you're saying. We got a friend that comes on here, Huna. I can't pronounce the rest of his name. He's tied into a lot of the elders around the world and some stuff that's tied to Lemuria and Atlantis and you know just different stuff, you know, and there's other people that are carrying bits and pieces of infinite intelligence, intel, whatever you want to call it, that are going out and doing grid work and this, you know, different kinds of things. One of the things that I look for in some of the other programs as I you know surf around and I look for programs like yours, like mine, is this subject matter. You know, I like yours because yours has this really grand, broad stroke of different subjects in it, and I love the emphasis on the athletic part of it too. That's a big piece that you bring to the table because that's got something to do with it. But you know, you don't see a lot of it being discussed, even in the alt news, and so it's really I think pretty fascinating that David is bringing this information to the table. Now, when it comes to this 20,000 years of oral history passed down amongst David and these people like him, like Clifford, is there, and you said there is kind of a common denominator, a common thread. What type of information is this, or have they not shared it? I mean, is this information in regard to our origins, in regards to the star seed history and the star nations and the relationship between the indigenous and the star nations? Is it that kind of information?
Those are all really great questions. I will say that I've been listening to David. I had the opportunity. So I, when, because I need to go back to kind of give people a reference point. But after that had happened, I called him the next day and I said, I saw something last night. Did you have something to do with that? And he said, yes. And so at that point, I saw it physically. Nothing like that had ever happened. I had a different UFO experience, but not like that one. And so I was like, you know what? That's enough for me to be really curious. But he said, you need to show up at my house. You know what I mean? And he says this on my podcast. He said it to everyone. He said, my door is always open. You are welcome to come by and have a tea with me. And so I showed up at his house. Then there was another very real paranormal experience that didn't happen to me, but it happened to my mom. So I've had like 4 stories of things that don't make any sense associated. But when you talk to David, he's never going to say anything about, anything fantastic, anything mystical. What he's going to talk about is kindness, compassion, happiness. And he's going to talk about knowing your neighbor. It took, so after I showed up, you know, we kept in communication. He said he needed help. And I said, I'll help you. You know, if people need help, I try to help to the best of my ability. If I think they're full of integrity, and was kind of just doing research because I was curious. I've been kind of seeking superhumans my whole life. If Jesus is here, I'm gonna find him and hunt him down and say what's up. If if there's a Babaji, or there's a current Yogananda or someone like that, I'm gonna show up. And so I went to train with the Shaolin monks. And they are superhumans. They can break stone with 2 fingers, but I figured out how. It wasn't superhuman ability. It was superhuman dedication to poking a tree with your finger and qigong for 8 years. No one's going to do that to break stone, but they did, and it's superhuman. And so, but I figured that out, and they really are. And so over time, he gave me the opportunity to come to Maine. He said, I haven't had anybody kind of study with me for a long period of time. You're welcome to come. And I had $27,000 of debt doing the podcast. And so if you want to do podcasts, to get into it. But no, you can,
We have a lot in common.
yeah, you can make a business out of it. You can, be more business minded than me, but had big debt. And I was also traveling a lot and doing that kind of thing. And I had $4,000 on my credit card of 5,000. And I didn't know how I was going to make there. So I did a huge leap of faith. I got a free place to stay for Berta and Ken, some of the nicest, greatest people of all time, put me up in this amazing barn. I ended up being able to pay off at least the credit card part of it. And I studied with him and stayed and traveled around with him for 2 months, no, more than that. It was like 4 months, 5 months, because I'm only allowed in the States for 6 months. And so in that time, we had met Clifford. We had done all these different things. So even my understanding with hanging out with him with that much is minimal. And what I'm trying to do is find other teachers, other people studying with Indigenous, other people who really know what they're talking about. Because what Clifford has told me and what David has told me is that even many of the Indigenous cultures and people, they're not even sure of their own history because of what we did to them, because of the school systems, because some of that oral history was lost. And so I've kind of watched David speak with Indigenous people and sharing other Mi'kmaq history that they didn't know, but they knew a lot of other stuff too. So it's piecing all of these crazy puzzle pieces together. So now I'll share, after that long-winded bit, the little I know. That's kind of what the thing is. I know a little, but of the little that I know, this is what's been stressed. One of the common denominators are the star people and the sky people. That for them is like dogs exist. Of course they exist, and they're here now. There's many of them. We're not the big and bad. We might be salmon for all we know. On the scale of how we perceive salmon, I think that's where we are on the scale, considering we're still murdering each other in mass. And, just look at how we're operating here. So that's kind of like the understanding that I have. They're here now. They're so advanced. Some of them, we wouldn't even, they couldn't even, I don't know. That doesn't matter. I got distracted by the idea that when David told me that these things can bend light around, he's like, you won't even see them. They'll be right there. They can bend light. We just came up with technology I saw the other day that bends light, that, that can make you invisible. So the big piece that he has been sharing over and over and over and over again in every single one of his talks, he says, if the other civilizations are going to talk to you, they're not going to talk to one person. They're not going to channel through one person and give you all of this information. They're going to come to a community. That's what they're going to do. So he is, he's like, if you're channeling, that's good. But I think his idea, I don't want to speak for him, but I think that in that way, he's like, that's a part of you and like your makeup and your understanding and what you're receiving through your own antenna. But if you want contact of a civilization like a human would, and you're in physical contact, how they had physical contact was a group of people together, because you have to have community. It's not one person, because one person can be special. We want it to be all people. And he's talked about these T's over and over and over again. And you sit in a circle, and I've been in these things and I didn't understand them at first, and everybody's equal. Everybody's a teacher. Nobody's better than anyone else. And you're tolerant of another person's view. That's it. You could be black, white, gray, Native American, old, religious, Catholic, Jew, whatever. And so if you have this different belief, the understanding in this circle is you're not going to harm anyone else. And the first 3 star teachings are kindness, compassion, and happiness. So what I'm kind of piecing together, and what I think, is that the Indigenous cultures had this. They had this peaceful community. And so there was an ability for that other civilization to make contact without fear of getting shot or harmed by the other civilization. And there's probably so much more information, but I can share that's been a huge staple. It's like, we need to come together. We need to be together in person, in resonance, in just being tolerant of another person's view in a circle, so that they can communicate with a mass of people. And going around with him and Clifford Mahooty and listening to them speak, they always ask very different questions than everyone else. They say, well, how do you know they're going to speak English? What makes you think they're going to speak English? It's like, what do you think an ant thinks? Like, why do you think an ant would have the same psychology of humans? Why do you presume that they would have this psychology? And going in to other episodes of watching him speak on the Leak Project and other stuff, he had shared that some of his teachers were star travelers in other episodes, and piecing that together.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is good information. I just wonder, I was in Sedona just recently. I didn't see Clifford, but I know there was a conference going that weekend. I wonder if they want to expand the awareness of the information they have. I'd love to be a part of that. What the other thing that really is jumping out at me right now is there's a lot of people that come on SoulSpeaks 5D that have different types of experiences. Many of those experiences are individualized. Some are with 2 or more people. My wife and I we've documented our journey for the last 3 or 4 years. We've been very upfront about some of the experiences we've had, which have included star family materializing in our bedroom, morphine, which is her, dragon energy, just different things like that. I wonder if the information that Clifford and David and people like this have, is it something that is being passed down strictly from a conversation, or is there some individual dimensional or interdimensional communication and or experiences that they're having? I would think there's got to be. If he's going to look at you and say, hey, go look up at the sky tonight, you might see something, and then you do. I think I'd probably still be sitting there with a camera a year later.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a really great question. And what I can say is that David is a scientist. And so being a scientist, he's part of he's a bit of a skeptic, and he's a mathematician also. And part of when he was in the Mi'kmaq community, and again, the non-natives have never had this history. So I'm looking at it and be like, you know what? A lot of what you're saying is really mind blowing. I'm showing up because I've had enough experiences, and he'd give me a lot of homework and a lot of research. I'm looking up the Philadelphia experiment. I'm looking up Shag Harbor incident. I'm looking up Knights Templar Mi'kmaq. Every time I get an opportunity, I'm trying to get engineers all the time, mathematicians, people smarter than me, to look at his work to see if he's full of crap so they can let me know. I was like, yo, man, I really missed the mark on that one, but please, I would like to try to poke a hole in his story, and he doesn't mind. And so I haven't been able to do it. And I've sent a lot of engineers his way. And I'm always looking for more, and we're always looking for participation. So I just wanted to say that he is a hardcore scientist. And so he's got to be able to measure it. And when he was in the Mi'kmaq community, they would have him look up what had bumps in the night, what was having bumps in the night. And so he would have to measure it and things like that, and try to figure it out. And he was doing that. And so his history, he said, those 26 years of training, he's like, I was a kid, I wanted to go out and play. This wasn't he's like, people hear my stories and they think it's special, and they think, I'm special. It's like, I'm not special. When he was a kid, they asked him to give the Mi'kmaq prophecy to the Eastern leader. He didn't know who that was. Flash forward 30 years later or so, he's handing letters to the Dalai Lama, who he met and handed the letters to, and apparently is privy to some of this information. And so his training was very intense, and his schooling was very, very intense. But it's like, if I'm going to teach you martial arts, or you're going to teach, or music, right? You relate to music. If you're going to learn piano, you could say, yeah, there is a metaphysical element to it, right? And but imagine you were schooled by the best pianists ever, and then they were like channeling or whatever, like Bach or whatever. They were like the essence, and they were able to communicate that. I would reference it more like that. It's like this lineage of education, really intense work, and his spiritual practice. It does get into the metaphysical point, but again, he says it over and over. He's like, you want to go into the metaphysical stuff, you need 3 people, and he explains it through. He says you only have one energy here, and it's electricity. Robert Grant, who I invite people to check out, he's a friend of mine. He has made these crazy, huge mathematical discoveries. He was at the Department of Defense, for frig's sake, because he'd cracked basically encryption. This is happening right now. This is my buddy. And so, he had to go there. But when they're having I don't know if I can share this, but basically David has talked about gravity and time. Now Robert Grant is like, those are the next 2 things we can solve for: gravity and time. And Robert is so darn smart. He is looking at that. And David has talked about that since the beginning. So I think a lot, like just like an engineering degree would take a lot of time, but there is also this spiritual element. And David talks about that spiritual element, but he's like, you need 3 people. And there's stories of healings in that community, but it's people working together. It's not just one doing it. He's like, if you have just one, then they become more powerful than you, but you're the powerful thing. You can heal yourself. And with community together, bonded together, what is possible? And I've always just used the idea of Team Earth. What if Team USA scientists and healers and doctors, like I like the healing idea, but also if you break your arm, you do need a doctor. That's science too. And so we need that moving in the right way. And David and Clifford and the Mayan elder Carlos Barrios all talked about when spirituality and technology were one. how they work together. And it's very important we learn how to play together. So if you have a piece of information, that's amazing. Share it with the community. Then that other person can share that information. Then we can use these tools to work together. Just like maybe if you're manning a ship, for example, an advanced race is trying to teach you how to build a boat and man a ship. And he's saying you can't do it by yourself because you're not going to be able to carry that tree. And I feel like that's kind of, even just saying it now, that's a good analogy of what he's talking about. He's like, yes, you are special. Yes, you're spiritual. Yes, you're connected to this whole universe, but you need community if you really want to make leaps and bounds. And I think it's civilization upgrade. And the civilization upgrade for us is peace. Once we have that, that's a huge step. And from what his recent teachings are, I think that the whole contact thing in a peaceful community is very possible if we work together, if we actually can form a little bit of a community.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And a lot of the a lot of what you're hearing people say on our show in the community is that, as we go into 2020, it's all about co-creation and collaboration and some type of new math where you don't have the preformed structuring and organizing and controlling that you do in the environment that we have now. You have more of a creative free flow, remove the agenda, remove the self-serving energies, and a lot along the lines of what he's describing. It also brings to mind, we recently met a guy named Greg Sullivan, who's out of Japan, who kind of had a wake up at James Gillian's ranch like 12 years ago and had an experience at a SETI ranch. And anyway, he's formed a group called JSETI in Japan. They've been doing it 10 years, taking that whole leg of the contact, or I think they call it Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, but taking it to Japan, taking it to the mainland, and taking it across the country with seminars and presentations. One of the things they do, you were talking about that circle. What they do is they get a group, and it could be 5 people, like you said, it could be 50 people, and they go out into specific spots, and they merge their intentions, and their intentions is to make contact. And they have some pretty incredible experiences. I don't question anyone's reality. I think it's all wide open, but I find it really interesting and really intriguing that, like, for instance, in where you've come from with your podcast and your life and where you're getting to now, the information that you're pulling in, it's like a vortex. Soulogy is like a vortex. You've got other people like Shane over at Unbiased on the Fence. It's like a vortex, all pulling this information in. People take it in, and it's like it shoots out from them and it expands. That's why people like David, I think, are so important, because that information, it's not like it's new information. This information's been passed down for, what would you say, 20,000 years. We're talking about stuff that has been hidden at a minimum, if not, something even beyond that. I think about I saw this article on, I think it's the Navajos, and there's a part of the Grand Canyon that nobody can go into but the Navajos. And it has a whole history behind it, a whole mythology behind it. I think they call them the ant people, but this has to do with a cataclysmic event and prior to it. So they went into the inner earth, and they actually have these dwellings built into the side of these mountains and cliffs. And they've got a whole history there that, I'd never heard about, and I've been researching for 8 years. But so I think there's a lot to it. I hope to see.
Clifford talks about them too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just Clifford talked about the ant people too, and did a documentary on it. And actually, one of the organizations that's taken a lot of that information is the Smithsonian. And so Clifford says, I know where all the spots are in the 4 corners. And now what you're going to find where that technology was, you're going to find bases, you're going to find military bases. And the Smithsonian came in and wiped a lot of those tunnels out and a lot of that information. And so that's where we get into the Vatican. What's in the Vatican library? This information I think it had to be suppressed for a reason, because there was a lot of war and all that kind of stuff and structure and power. And so if you knew that this was real, it would break the paradigm of most religions, which still have a real huge hold on the world today. And, I don't want to say that to knock religion, because there are some good points to it. But the thing is, those institutions have kind of caused a lot of harm, and there is an underlying intention maybe in some of them that aren't that's going to have opposing knowledge, just for when Christopher Columbus comes over, and there was 8 million Mi'kmaq when he came over, and most of them got wiped out through disease. And at first it was a peaceful relationship with the French. That's what I found out. And apparently they signed the first treaties with the French in France in their castle. And so then it was the British that came over and started to get all frigged up in that sense. But this history and this culture is really fascinating. So I'm just curious about what the truth is. And that's why I went with Clifford, with David, with the Mayan elder, and these other ones, to try to piece together, were they saying the same thing? Is it the same as other things I'm hearing? Because I want to be supportive of whatever anyone's process is at the time. I've believed stuff that I don't believe now, and I believed it, pretty intensely. So it's just trying to find the most truthful information, but also move and navigate forward. Even though you're kind of like, you don't really know what's going on, do it in a place of trying to be of service to your community, trying to just not only think for yourself and how you can get, and just generally be a good human as you do it.
Yeah, like a broadcaster. You're like a
Yeah.
broadcaster, like a transmitter. Yeah, and a lot of it, if you look at like the Dogon tribe, you look at the Maori, you look at the Aborigines, and of course the Native Americans. There is a lot of, similarities. There's a lot of common threads in their stories, which were handed down from an oral tradition. Now, it takes me to the contemporary, to the present. Like people talk about this, the ascension, they talk about this transition, this unveiling, the truth coming out, and all that stuff. And I look at this whole thing and I'm like going, wow, man, this is like some complicated stuff. I mean, I've got memories of galactic wars. We're talking dragons, we're talking fairies, we're talking, disincarnated souls. And I'm just like everybody else. Everybody's having their own unique experience. What the hell's going on here? And then I look at someone like Matt, or my own aspirations, or other people that I see moving and shaking out there and just shining. And I think, can it be that simple? Can it be as simple as just shine your light, to thine own self be true, service to the community? Can it just be pushing that offensive, energetic ball up, instead of trying to, being on our heels, like so much of this wake up material, this disclosure material, this conspiracy material has, struck fear into people, like, oh my God, that didn't happen. Oh my God, did that happen? But I mean, how much difference do you think one individual's soul on fire can make in this world at this stage in the game?
Well, you shared a lot there, and it's a really good question. The first thing that I'll share is the idea of the ascension and all of that stuff that's going on. And I'll share it from my own perspective and also from being around David a lot. So one of the things he had me research was magic. And I know a lot more about magic now. Magic is pretty cool. One thing that I have discovered is black magic. And what for me black magic is when you do a magic trick, but you tell people it's your superpowers that you have from the spirit to then do this thing. So one person doing a magic trick, doing black magic, is a man named Nithyananda. And some people follow him and really like them. They were actually friends with mine on Facebook, and we have a conversation. But the reason why I know this is because he's got these 3 girls that have the third eye powers, right? We look up 3 girls with third eye powers. What they're doing is a magic trick. They have in either in their hair or some other way, they have something that allows them to get the information and do a simple magic trick. Who was doing this back in the day was Uri Geller. Uri Geller got exposed. He's still in it, doing it to this today. Same with Peter Popoff. Peter Popoff had a whole people in a frenzy, and he got exposed. He's still doing it to this day. So that to me is black magic. And I think that what's happening. And so I'll tell you an additional story with those 3 girls. We were at the Parliament of World Religions. I was with David Lombear Senepass. He is a magician and he's also a scientist. He sees these 3 girls walking. He runs up to them. He says, "Hey girls, can I show you a magic trick?" And so they go, "Okay." So he pulls out a coin and he goes, "Which hand is it in?" He puts his hands out and he goes, "All 3, you got to get it right." And he puts his hands out and all 3 girls, they say left hand, right? And so all three girls guess, they agree, he turns it over and it's wrong. These are the girls that have the third eye powers, that can see through paper, that can tell you what's wrong with you, all this stuff. There's a posse of people behind these three girls. I'm beside David and I feel super awkward because I know exactly what he's doing. The people, they look concerned because they see him doing something. I should have filmed it, but I felt too awkward. So I was trying to make awkward conversation with one of the mothers. It wasn't working. He does it again. He goes, which hand is it in? And they all three guess. They think it's the hand and they guess wrong again. They're in awe. They're like, oh, that's amazing, right? He does it a third time. Two of them guess wrong. They agree, but the one guesses right because she saw him slide it in his pocket this time. I think he did it on purpose because he's that good. And these two got it wrong, but this one's like, no, he put it in his pocket. So the point was, he goes, thank you, girls. We'll see you later. And so the next day he went down there and they had this huge booth where they were doing this magic trick, saying that there was third eye legit powers. To get these powers, you go pay $10,000 in India, you get tapped on the third eye and you can have the powers too, right? And they're like, oh no, it's free. And he just goes, my name's David, I represent 300,000 Native American people. I just wanted to ask you a question. Are you deceiving people? And they went into a conversation which I need to put on YouTube. I still have it. I'm going to put it on YouTube. But so I see, like, there's part of this thing, like the Shaolin monks. How the heck can somebody break stone with two fingers? How does that happen? Well, that was through extraordinary skill, practice, dedication to hard qigong and also meditation, years of dedication. There's a documentary with a guy called the Iron Cowboy. His name's James Lawrence, I think. And he did 50 marathons in 50 days in 50 states on between 2 and 5 hours of sleep. That is unbelievable. Somebody just ran a marathon in 2 hours. That's 13.1 or 2 miles an hour for 2 hours. It's unbelievable. But they did that through extraordinary training. It wasn't just like that. And so in the spiritual game, in the ascension game, in all of that thing, I think that some of that stuff in pick and like pieces is correct and people are spot on, but there's also this grounded part in martial arts that I've always had. There's a grounding in science. We can't dismiss all of that. It could be true, but because it's now become popular, you have a lot more stuff going out there with less mastery. So the discernment, it gets challenging because it's exciting. And what David and Clifford refer to it as is what the heck is it? Like the lights and the fluffy stuff. It's just like, well, it's not fluffy and exciting to sit in a circle and just be a good human. It's not fluffy enough to do one of the best spiritual teaching I've ever heard by far. I've got books over there. I've done courses. I got 300 episodes of a podcast, piecing things together. The best spiritual teaching I've ever heard by far is do 3 kind acts a day, go out of your way to do it, and don't tell anyone. And that was from David Lonebear. And since I've been doing that, and he explained to me in a 2-hour lesson when I was at his house in Maine, which I only know a bit of because he explained it through science and math, was how that our body's electromagnetic. You have 2 spirit guides, a positive and a negative, not to be mistaken with good or bad, because the body is the ground, positive, negative ground to run an electrical circuit in a simulation. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good. And so he's like, you need both.
That's a triad right there. That's the Trinity right there.
Yep. And so when you take the action, you're then connecting to another person. And so that's when he's like, if you want the higher consciousness, you have to do it together. And because only one, and then he did like another 2-hour lesson. And I had to go through each piece of like what a node was and how electrical engineering worked. I had a mini class in electrical engineering, and then it clicked. I was like, oh, each human is the node, or I don't know if that's the right thing, but more of us together can hold more energy. And so that big, like, imagine like the difference of a consciousness between ants and us, if we're the higher one, or us and ducks. Like, you see a duck, but we're trying to help a duck become the level of human consciousness. It's such a gap. They're not going to understand the language. They're not going to, it's such a huge gap. How is he going to do it? But together, maybe it's possible that we make this leap. And that's the together part of it. So all of the things that are kind of being discussed about, evolving consciousness and peace and having all of these abilities, right? Show me the person with the abilities. They're going to come on my podcast. I'm going to show up at their house. I haven't met anybody with those. Like, David is the closest, and he'll never say that he has them. not one time. If he has the ability, it's probably because he has the
Yeah.
science. But
Yeah.
he also created a bike that went 40 miles an hour with a tier capacitor that worked and people saw. So if you were full of crap, his science shouldn't work either. So the thing that I wanted to share with that is that I think it's all possible together, but can an individual make such a massive impact on this planet? 100%. And how that works is when somebody transforms and they come back to those simple things. Who am I? What do I want? How can I contribute? How can I live an extraordinary life? How can I give back? What's important to me? How do I grow? How can I be kind? All these basic things that are not sexy. Training isn't fun. It's hard. I learned through martial arts.
Yeah.
I embrace that so I can grow. But I get grounded in it too. And it allows me more of an opportunity to grow or experience. And so I think that that's the same with the ascension thing, is that it's that grounded thing. You're going to change your whole life when you change your inner world. You changing your life changes the
Yeah.
universe because you're the only one experiencing it. And as people look at that, you can then, because you're whole, you're complete, you're done the work where you're not going to push someone down, you can hold their hand. You don't need to be better than, worse than. You can allow them to have a totally different view than you because you're whole in yourself. And you also are curious about how they're experiencing things. You hold their hand, you hold someone else's hand. Then to me, that seems like a practical way for us to ascend together. No better than, no worse than, together, learning from each other's unique experience and honoring that view, honoring that belief, honoring that experience, whatever. It was like, well, I love hearing those stories. Like what, how did that work? Was it a physical manifestation? Was it an imagination? Like, that sounds wild. What did you learn from it? Could you implement it? And so, that's a big, huge rant, and I'll just end it there.
No, I love it, man. We could go on for hours.
Yeah, I can get
No, and I
ranty.
wonder about that stuff too, man. And it gets really down to the individual experience. I know, yeah, I know. I do the same thing, but I know, like, if I look back at my own trip, like the last 8 years before I met my wife, some of the things that happened to me had a physical apparition to it. There was no question. Now, was somebody standing next to me? No. you know do I know it in my heart? Yeah, I know it happened. I know what I saw, I know what I heard. But then when we came together and started cohabitating and things started happening, that's a little bit different. So that energy, all those energies seem to be out there. I think what you're talking about, what David brings to the table, and what's starting to happen as a possibility or potential with humanity, is being able to work in unison, or to have like a symbiotic relationship, a cooperative relationship with this non-physical, or whatever you want to call it. But I also agree with you too, and I know you didn't say it this way, but I do think, like everything, it can become a fad, it can become commercial, and there's a lot of disinformation out there that's premeditated disinformation, but there's also a lot of, to me, there's the information out there that's not, maybe loses some of its purity from the point of reception to the point of trying to verbalize it and put it in a human language. So there's a lot of stuff happening. What I agree with the most about what you say is going back to the simplicity. It's not that complicated. I'm not saying it's easy, but the basic parameters and the basic guidelines are very simple. Things like community, to thine own self be true. There's no superiority, there's no inferiority. I mean, these things are just basic stuff that we know in our heart. And I know we can cliche this thing and new age-ish cliche it to the death, but I my hashtag is I am soul and the human is the hero. So whatever we're doing here, I think the human is the primary, obviously the primary aspect in our multidimensionality, however you want to put it. But I just think we're getting to a point now where if I look at things energetically, it's those souls that are lighting it up that, like you said, we don't even know what we're doing here. I mean, you just like you said with your 50-second episode, you didn't even know what you were doing. And I know what you mean, because I go back and watch some of the old stuff every now and then, like, oh my God, I can't believe that shit's even out there. But yeah, but it's like it's kind of like you're an athlete. So I mean, it's like getting to a point of rawness and vulnerability in action. You know, like where you're not just sitting there going, okay, here's all my skeletons, and here's my shadows. That's a type of rawness and vulnerability. But this is actually getting out there and getting with it and making something happen from your purest intention, regardless of how it comes out, because that's a beautiful thing. That's a masterpiece. It really is. And people like you, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I'm just saying, this is original what you do. There's an originality to it. It started from nothing. I watched your first episodes. I talked to you before. I know how you started. It was very similar. You're talking to friends. You're just like winging it, and look what happens. And look how fast it happens. That's incredible. So when I saw your post the other day with the metrics that you had on it, I was like, yeah, because one thing about this energy, if you can do something, I can do it, and you trained
Yes.
for a long time to be a world-class snowboarder. It might take me a while, but the point is the potential is being maximized, and that's an energetic impression that's being reverberated out onto this earth. And I think many people are picking up the ball now and starting to put all those differences and superiority, inferiority, and all that stuff behind them, and starting to be, become a more of a collective effort from the individual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And the way that you summarize that is really great. And I really love how you put it, because for me, I was super curious. I was just made this way. I was just curious. I liked martial arts. I wanted to know if superhumans exist. I still do. I know, if you've had that experience, that oneness mind, that whatever you want to call it, maybe it's a city or there's lots of names for it. But if you've actually had that experience, you know for sure that you don't know anything. And I know that. I only know a tiny bit of a tiny bit of a tiny bit. We are
Mhm.
engaging fully in the mystery. And so the thing to be aware of it is just misleading. Like you kind of says, like it's a little bit fluffy. They don't have like the generational wisdom. They're not doing it on purpose, right? But why do the indigenous cultures have elders? Why is it that you know more at 40, at 50, at 60 from pursuing things over a lifetime? I just recently saw something about, Michelangelo's work and Da Vinci and things like that. Their best work came at 60, 70, 80. And they're
Yeah.
doing this like, that was a lifetime to get to this mastery point. And so all of the things that I feel the community is talking about, psychic powers and ascension and this new consciousness and peace, all of that, I feel like when you explained it, it's so possible with the individual. Every single person is connected to spirit everywhere. You're going to start having the experiences if you can start doing the very simple things. And if you listen to real masters like Yogananda and all these other people, they say it's not about that. That's for you to remember that this is a human experience. If you knew everything, you wouldn't be in this game right now. This is the thing, because you have that veil. Can you make that choice that's full of integrity? And a lot of those choices are not sexy, unfortunately. You know what I mean? And so, all the things about like meditation. I spent 3 months in Qualitat Habitat, like meditating most of the days. I have meditated an hour a day for pretty well a year or more. I did a 1200 breath pattern. What each breath was 1 to 3 minutes, and I did that to upgrade my consciousness. I last year cold training, right? Cold training is supposed to make you enlightened or do something
I
for you.
saw that.
So I
I
did it
saw
without
that.
training, -40, and
Yeah.
went in there because I was taught to see how my body would experience it. And I went to do that because I wanted to know what the result was. And in experiencing these things and doing these things and testing all of the protocols that come out there for the higher consciousness, for the ascension, the way that I like to wrap it up, from my understanding, because there's always room for growth, and this is just where I'm at with it right now, is there's a very important grounded element. Figure out you are connected to spirit. All that metaphysical stuff that's being put out there, totally possible. But you're going to be the one who's going to do it, and you have the power within you. So you got to figure out how to look within, connect to spirit in your own way, communicate with spirit in
Yeah.
your own way. But here's the hard part. You got to figure out who you are. You got to figure out what you're passionate
Yeah.
about. You got to figure out how you're going to help others. You got to do the things that, maybe are a little bit challenging. You're going to have to put in the work. You're going to have to take leaps of faith. Of the people on my podcast that I find of the highest spiritual integrity, if there's even a thing, and most success, they had consistent leaps of faith over and over and over again to a vision that they created that's inspiring. It wasn't an easy process. I don't know anyone that was just like, oh, I connected with spirit and it was so simple and easy forever. You know, it was like we had these challenges and roadblocks. And so it's that grounded piece as well. I think that's important because I do think that those skills are possible, but they're going to be curated over a lifetime. And if they're going to be gifted to you, it's not going to be through a protocol. It might be, right? But people would be able to do it, then we'd all do it together. And it makes the most sense in researching this stuff that we should do it together. That it's and that's what I learned in martial arts, in skateboarding and snowboarding, and in peak performers and high level spiritual people. It's the integrity. Same with the Dalai Lama. That guy works his butt off, and he always comes back to a very simple and humble message. But through that, you're going to have these experiences, and I've had them, but they're few and far between. Most of the time, I'm just like doing it another day, here we go. And can I do that from a state of completion, of happiness, of wholeness, of joy? That's my journey. How can I enjoy the process as much as possible? And I have a lot of growth in that. So I think it's both worlds because I've had those experiences that are so mind blowing, but I know it's not just about that. It's not about me doing telekinetic powers. That'd be really cool. But could that end hunger? If my telekinetic powers could end hunger, I would work harder on them. I want to know how we end hunger, how we have peace, how we have Team Earth, how we have people who are whole. And there's all this sick society that we live in that's kind of designed this way. How can we do a little bit to make it better? That to me is a step towards ascension.
There you go. There you go. Just hold that vibration, hold that frequency. Yeah. And I agree with you, that's why I always, I don't know, I gravitate to the individual that has that collective inside of them or can affect the collective by the actions or thoughts or words that they carry forward. Because anything outside of myself potentially is a program that includes ascension. I look at ascension the same way I do Donald Trump or Clinton or QAnon or another country or another religion or whatever it is. What really intrigues me is people like David, some of the people you discover that are on your show and on some of these other shows that actually have information that can accelerate the expansion of other individuals. These are not people that are looking to take people's power away. These are people that are looking to empower other people. So I think that is a frequency that I see expanding, and that's a great sign to me. Now you got a website. I'm going to pull it up here.
I want to add something.
I want to pull this. Go ahead, add it.
Yeah. I really like that thought. And I think the idea too is the challenge is, like, if you listen to Alan Watts describe enlightenment, he's like, it's like a knife trying to cut itself. Can you hear me? You can hear me, right? So this ascension thing, I think we're so on the right point of on a lot of things, but it's also indescribable. It's also something we haven't achieved yet. It's also something we're very curious about. And so because of that, it creates a lot of confusion and mystery. And so we're learning together and we're imagining together a new world. We're like, man, this new world where we had like, we were super healthy. We had telekinetic powers. We could use telepathy. Well, right now we can through language. Before we couldn't say, pass the butter. We couldn't do anything like that. Oh, did I lose you? Shoot. Am I talking to myself? Oh no. Todd. You can see we're live still. I'm hoping Todd's going to come back on. I don't know how it's happened that I'm still here. Let me see if I can bring him back in. Oh, there we go. That was good.
You still there?
Yeah. I was talking to myself for a bit, but we're good. You just got to start your video
you started
again.
Doing some light language. I don't know what happened. You were coming in on like on light language. It was
coming
let
in.
me see here.
Coming in hot.
I don't know. It won't. No, mine's mine. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on.
Yeah, you're back in the game. I can see you.
No. Yeah. I caught most of that. Yeah, I caught most of it. I know. We just have like-minded frequencies. I mean, I see it because I see your work and I see where you're doing, and you don't have which is common. I never was an athlete to the degree that you are, but I spent a lot of time, and it helped me a lot. Athletics when I was younger and as a young adult. But you can develop a very competitive nature, a win-win attitude, and the training and all that stuff. And it can supply a healthy ego. But I love the fact that you go out there and you make this happen, and you check your ego at the door. I was happy to see we spent a day. We were invited by Laura Eisenhower and her husband to spend a day on the Red Rocks in Sedona with her. And then I was really happy to see, I haven't watched it yet, but I was happy to see that you were on her program. So I'm really happy to see that you're getting there's more awareness about you, and you're getting more opportunities. And I'd love to collaborate with you again in the future. I want to show everybody real quick your website. We don't do a whole lot of this anymore, but I think this is important. This is Matt Belair, author, athlete, coach, speaker. He's got his podcast listed here. He's got his Zen athlete section listed here. There's a lot of good information. Now, can they get your book on this site, or do they have to go to Amazon?
Yeah. So, well, what I always do with the podcast, and I'll kind of have to do the whole thing, but it's worth it. So, for me, man, the hope and the bottom line is that if the work that I do and me being on the planet can support more kindness, can support people believing in themselves, can support a world towards more peace, more community, then that's great. And what I hope for is empowered people, because we are in the mystery. I think that a part of this, for me too, wanting enlightenment and all that kind of stuff, I wanted an answer. I thought that my consciousness would weave into what I perceive as Christ consciousness or Babaji or someone like that. It may be possible that may happen, and I hope it does. But what I'm thinking now of just studying and doing course after course and book and Zen reading and meditation and every practice to get to that point, those books and those words keep coming back to the same stuff. It's like you're already there. It's really how does a 4-year-old need to be enlightened? Are they enlightened? Are they enlightened by their 12, or do they figure it out at 16 or 25? I think that it's like you take 100% responsibility for who you are and where you are and what you're passionate about, and you think about how you can give back a little bit. That for me is like the decision and avenue toward enlightenment. And maybe we get to that spot of Christ consciousness. I hope so. And I'm still going to work towards it. But what I think that people suffer so much about is that they don't feel empowered. They feel like they're a slave. They feel like they aren't in control of their emotions. They think that the world's against them. They can't create an empowering reality. And I always ask people, if you had $1 million when I'm coaching every day for the rest of your life, what would you do? And then some people are so logical, they can't get past that, because if you ask, what is your dream? For us to live in this world, we need to eat. For us to eat, we need to make money. And that's going to give us the food. So the logical mind is going to distort that. But I had a friend who's so analytical. I just did an on the spot hypnosis with him. I hypnotized him into his heart. It's just guided meditation is all it is. Guided meditation into his heart, asked him the same series of questions, gives me a list of beautiful answers, starts crying in the middle. And I realized that this process is very helpful, because your heart knows it's eternal. And so I've almost died like 4 times. I had a gun held to my head in Guatemala like 6 months ago in the forest out of nowhere. And so in those experiences, what I can say is that, what I was lucky and fortunate to think at that time was, I guess like, this is it, I'm done being on the planet. I didn't have regrets, because I just did the best with what I knew. I made a ton of mistakes. I still don't know much now, but I know that I'm trying and I'm listening to that little voice, and I'm trying to do step by step, but my vision and how I want to express that is very clear. And that's the only difference between me and most people. It's like, what do I want to grow? What would I need to do to grow in this way? And so the heart journey helps make that really clear. And I've done it with average Joes, successful people, artists, and everything in between. And as humans, we all want the same basic things. We want good relationships. We want good family. We want to be in nature, most of us, and we want to have time and enough money to do the things that we want. It's very simple. It's like tiny house mentality, and a great abundance can come from that too. And that's great. But if you put the abundance first, it's really hard. It's kind of putting the cart before the horse. And Alan Watts said, do what you love first and then figure out the money second. And so the heart journey really helps with that. And then the Zen Athlete book is just the best protocols and processes that I've seen to achieve a goal. And so you need a heart-centered goal. For me, I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I write down like, I want to be of service. Let me help as many people as I can, you know, and I kind of clarify that vision as I go through. And you're seeing how it's unfolding. It's manifesting through a podcast. It's manifesting through a book. It's manifesting through me, you know, traveling and exploring these different cultures, and also making mistakes and modifying my beliefs and doing the best. So I think that for me, you know, and people can get, and the reason why I did that whole spiel is because you can go to mattbelair.com/masters of flow, and you can get them both for free as a gift. And if you want to get the hard copy book, go for it. Any coach, any organization, any yoga teacher, you know, my hope in my vision that I hold, and I don't know how I'm going to do this, but make mental training for sport mainstream. Teach kids about personal internal dialogue, how to clear their mind, how to visualize, and how to have a positive and powerful perspective, because that's what we're using to navigate all of life. No matter how successful or where you are in the process, you're going to be hitting adversity. You're going to be hitting challenges. You're going to feel not good enough. You're going to need to have that faith experience. And that's where spirit really comes in those times, if you can make those leaps. But you have to have the mental tools to help and support you. And most of what our culture is designed to do is to teach us to be comfortable, to be safe, to not go outside the box, and to have a very poor self-image. So we need to know how to construct a powerful self-image about how we are, what we want to create, and to create from our inspirations, to be in spirit. That's how you be in spirit. You know, so I'm in spirit because I'm inspired, but I'm also freaking confused. you know, and I'm trying to engage the mystery, but you know, take some action, take the action in the confusion. And so it'll get clearer and clearer as you continue to move forward.
Yeah, I love it because the real talk comes from those. You know, you were talking about Michelangelo and some of those other ones. There's that. I love that meme. I share it every year because it comes up on my memories, and it just says Michelangelo, 87 years old. I'm still learning. You know, and when somebody's talking to me, you know, about their experience, their skills, their abilities, their journey, their wisdom, because we all carry it, you know. But like you said, we really don't know anything. But the point is, it's that delivery, it's that, you know, that humanness that sells me, you know. And it's that heart, actually, is what you're talking, you know, what you're talking about. It's that heart. I think that's another thing that we're starting to see too, is, and I've heard a lot of people tell me this, you know, in messages and in comments, and they'll be like talking about different guests, and they'll say, you know what, I don't know what the hell they were talking about, but I know it's true. I can see their truth. I can see their heart, you know, and I think people are starting to pick up on that. And I think it's growing pretty rapidly. I just want to thank you for not just coming back on. I'd love to collaborate with you in the future. I have a feeling we will. But just for the work that you're doing and having the etheric balls to be out there doing it, because it's not easy. You're right. You know, there's people all over this world. You interview them, and I do too. That get this guidance. I mean, I'm sitting, you know, in 2 weeks here in a remote cabin in Northern California in the middle of nowhere, you know, and society and 3D or whatever you want to call it says that, you know, you don't have any money, you don't have nothing. I mean, you're just, so what if this happens? What if that happens? And you know, we just energetically, it's all the same thing. We keep getting, we follow this guidance, we take those leaps that you're talking about. And I agree with you 100,000%. The proof is in the pudding. These people that are taking these leaps one after the other, which may look different on the superficial, but it's really all the same thing. Could be somebody just having the guts to leave a relationship or leave a job or leave a community or leave a lifestyle or whatever the case may be. But there's something that happens. It's very magical and alchemical that happens when you take those leaps and you jump off those mountains. And I think you're doing and I think above all else, if anything, cut all the rhetoric out. It's the energetic example that we set that actually illuminates and lights this grid up. And so I just want to say personally, thank you for inspiring me. Thank you for when I get down a little bit and I see you doing something, like, okay, I got to go back to work, you know. But thank you for inspiring other people, motivating other people, and for what you do every day. And I wish you and your family and your new baby the very best. And you know, until the next time. And just again, thank you for coming on again.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate the kind words, and I really, really want to reflect them back to you for just continuing to follow, what you think you're supposed to do, and have the courage to do it, because it's hard. And I don't know anyone putting out as much content as me other than you, and you put out more, and I put out so much, and it's so time consuming.
Yeah.
So it's unbelievably impressive how much you're doing, and thank you for doing it. And every time you share something, I just keep wanting to add it on. So thanks for allowing me. But just, it's like that intuition, it's like whoever you are, we're not really sure, but we want to move forward. And when we're talking about all these things, most people are just locked in default consciousness, whatever society wants for them. So there's so many different ways to express and connect with spirit, right? And once you realize you're not your default consciousness, you're not just your monkey mind, it can manifest in millions of different ways. And people are they're saying, hey, that's what everyone's shouting. Hey, it's not just the monkey mind. I've realized that I could like go into my heart. I've realized, oh, what if there is fear? And I'm exploring these other ideas. And I had this weird insight. Now you're expressing and exploring spirit. That's the idea. There is, even very religious people,
Yeah.
I've seen them, people who don't believe, they think I'm crazy, but they're like, I'm only Christian. What they're doing is they have a full faith in God. And we're trying to connect to God. We're trying to connect, to me, I'd say nature.
Yeah.
I want to connect to nature,
Yeah.
and my nature is expressing itself. If I can be honest with my high quality impulses that are serving the highest expressions of me, I know what the lower ones are. Can I have the courage and the faith to empower, grow, learn the high quality impulses that I have, so I can become who I can become through my own choosing. And so we all have that ability. We all have that connection. We are all spiritual. There's lots beyond the default consciousness, and we're getting it there some way. But once you start touching it, you got to bring it back to grounded, because my book, Zen Athlete, is like, yo, kids, you got to visualize. It's a part of sport. You can be a way better athlete if you learn the mental game, but you cannot reject fully the physical. And that's what I think a lot of the teaching is now. It's like, hey, law of attraction, all that. Yes, but we got to go to work too. You got to know how to plan. You got to know how to goal set. You got to know how to show up. If you do that with empowered beliefs, removing the limitations, then visualizing and doing from a high emotional state, which is what all those metaphysical teachings are basically saying in different words. Now you're kicking ass and you are moving. Now give yourself something you would spend a lifetime doing. Now you're playing the game. Now you're in it, and it's going to be a mystery, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to piss you off. You're going to have great times, but just do your best to like hang on and enjoy. So thanks, man. Thank you. I get that last rant in there.
Yeah, you're gonna have some. I call them. Yeah, I call them the come to Jesus meeting with the universe. Sometimes, when you when you're like, what am I doing, man? I ain't got any money. I mean, what's happening here? Why get back to work? No, you're right on, bro. You're right. I love talking to you. I hope to maybe meet you one day and cross paths with you. But until then, just keep on keeping on, and wishing you the best always, man. You take care.
You too.
Right?
We will, man. Peace.
Out.
Thank you.